Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hoops Crush podcast, episode number 25. I got my man Brady Parks, aka Crushables, with me. How you doing, Brady?
I am doing good. How about yourself?
Good. I'm excited for this episode because we finally have, I don't know if it's juicy or not, but a rumor about the Blazers this offseason and that we can talk about. And then we have our finals matchup set, so we'll get into that. Talk about the ending of the last two series as they were both 2-0 the last time we spoke, and then talk a little bit about the two losing teams off season, all that. So lots of fun stuff to talk about as we are very close to the 2023-2024 season being officially over and crowning a champion. And then we can focus solely on the off season, and in particular our Portland Trailblazers. But yeah, there was a report by Jonathan Gavoni of ESPN Draft Express. He had several draft intel things he has been hearing. And something he has been very steady and consistent on this entire process has been that Donovan Clingan has a lot of teams have him top 3, or that he's going to go very much in the top of this draft. And I'm assuming you are a Donovan Clingan fan because in our mock-off season, you were the Oklahoma City Thunder. You gave up quite a bit just to move up a couple spots to get him in the draft. So that was a rumor that has been floated around for a while, that Clingan was going to go somewhere in the top of the draft. The new information is that there's 3 teams potentially trying to move up to get Donovan Clingan. And those teams are the Memphis Grizzlies, the Chicago Bulls, and the Portland Trailblazers. So I guess 2-part question. We'll start with the first part. What do you think of Donovan Clingan and all that kind of stuff? Do you think he'd be a good fit on the Blazers if that's truly a target of theirs?
Yeah, I like Donovan Clingan. I think he could be a really good big man in the NBA. As far as, I'm not sure if he'll ever be like an all-star or anything like that, but I think he would be like the perfect bench center to have. So that's kind of why I wanted him on the Thunder, because they needed size, and I thought he'd be one of the better big men to get. As far as him coming to Portland, I wouldn't hate it. I know a lot of people, some Blazers fans are very high on DeAndre Ayton. For me, I don't see Ayton as a long-term starting center. I really don't. Maybe the Blazers do, but I feel like he's just here for a little while, and then we'll see what happens at one point. But maybe Ayton's here for a long time. I'm not sure. It just doesn't feel like he's like going to be the long-term guy. But yeah, moving up is definitely interesting. I guess I know what rumor you're talking about. I guess I must have read that wrong. I think I read it that like 3 teams were trying to move up to number 7 to get Clingan. So I didn't realize we were one of the teams interested in Clingan. So that's interesting, and I'm not too surprised by it because, I mean, outside of Ayton, we have Robert Williams, who has injury questions, and then obviously Duop Reith, which he had a pretty solid season last year, but I'm not really sure what his future is as far as, always being part of a rotation. So it doesn't surprise me in the least bit that Clingan is someone that Portland might be interested in. Now, as far as trading up to get him, I'm not sure I would be in love with that idea. If he fell to 7 and we took him, I'd be fine with it, but I don't know if I'm like lining up to trade up, to get Clingan, especially if it like costed us like 14 or something to move up, or something like that. So yeah, I mean, it's okay with me, but it's not like dire, I think. So I hope they don't treat it like that situation, I guess.
Well, that was going to be the second part of the question is we heard the Trailblazers radio play-by-play voice, Travis Demers, go on Reddit and say that the Blazers were somewhat relieved to move down in the draft if they weren't going to get the number 1 pick because of this draft. There's a lot of prospects that are fairly evenly ranked between 2 and 10, 12. And so you get to pay that player a little less. The Blazers are obviously in a bit of a cap crunch this summer, being as of right now, unless they make some moves over the luxury tax line and up close to that first apron, which has some stricter penalties starting this offseason. So to hear that, and if that's true, to then hear that they're looking to move up, and then on top of moving up, giving up another asset you would think would probably take, I mean, if you're talking about moving up to 3 or something, you're probably going to have to give up a somewhat decent asset alongside the 7th pick or whatever to move up those 4 spots. And then there's extra salary that comes with the 3rd pick versus the 7th pick. So unless they save money in another trade, that's even more money they'd have to clear. And then on top of that, as you mentioned, it'd probably be a backup at least for one season. Does that mean they don't believe in Ayton long term? The team, after seemingly pushing it pretty hard, that they were trying to say how good he was and stuff at the end of last season. So a lot of questions as to why they would want to move up if they have a situation where the tax is an issue, and also why would you move up for a backup center unless you were 100% confident he was a starting level center long term? And if you want to say he is, that's fine. I think it's kind of borderline. I think if he is, he'd be kind of like one of the lower end starting centers. But to me, that's not the type of player you move up in the draft to get. Like you said, if he fell to 7 and you got him without giving up any assets, that's one thing. But if you're giving up assets to move up into the top 3 or 4 to grab him, to me, that player needs to have a chance, even if it's a slim chance, of being like a star level player or an all-star type, or at least a fringe all-star type. I don't like trading up that high just because you need some rim protection and this guy can block some shots without any regard as to the fit on your roster in terms of already having a center, and then also maybe not the best lob target or guy to run if we're going to be a faster paced team with Scoot and Sharp in the future. Those kind of things might not lead to Clingan being the best center prototype for this particular roster moving forward. So it's just like a lot of weird things. So like, what do you think is going on here with these rumors? Do you think it's a smokescreen, or do you think they really just like Clingan that much and are just going to do whatever they can to get him?
Yeah, to be honest, the rumor doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't think this is the draft to move up for anybody, really. I don't think this is that type of draft. So I don't know if Jonathan Givony is the kind of guy that like makes up stuff. Like, it doesn't sound like he is. So like I don't know, man. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. Like, this is, like I said, this isn't the draft to move up. If they're really that enamored by Clingan, I hope they just, this draft is so weird because I just don't even know how it's gonna go. Literally, no one knows. Maybe we know who number 1 is, but outside of that, like, it feels like anything is going to happen. Like, anything is possible.
Well,
so
you just said I think we know where number 1 is, but that was another part of that article, was that Ricochet is getting a lot of buzz.
See, like, this draft's gonna be crazy,
1,
man.
So.
Yeah,
I will say,
go ahead.
If Alex Sarr, if you have a chance to move up and get Alex Sarr, I know a lot of people won't agree with this. I think he's the one player in this draft that would fit exactly the type of center we would need long-term alongside Scoot and Sharp and Anthony or whoever's still here between those 3, and then would allow you to do a lot of things defensively that we couldn't do with Donovan Clingan, who you'd probably have to play a lot of drop coverage with Donovan. whereas Alex Sarr can switch on to guards, kind of thinking that Bam Adebayo type role versus Rudy Gobert or something for Donovan Clingan. I'm not saying either of those players are those guys. I'm just saying those are the like physical traits they have defensively. Clingan's not going to be able to switch out onto guards and keep them in front of him like Alex Sarr can. And Alex Sarr maybe isn't quite the rim protector that Clingan is, although they're both very good in that regard. So I think if you had a chance to move up because Alex Sarr fell to 2 or 3, then maybe you talk about it. But I don't think it makes sense for anyone else in this draft.
Yeah, I generally hope that there's no team that's going to trade up. I just don't think this is the kind of draft to do this. Like, I just don't think it make any sense.
Yeah, so the more I think about it, the more the smoke screen makes sense. And that is because if you're the Blazers and there's like 5 guys you want, and Clingan isn't one of those 5 guys, then maybe you're worried that you're going to get stuck with Clingan, right? And
maybe, yeah.
You're fine with Ayton moving forward. I'm not saying this is like based on anything. I'm just trying to play this out to try and make it make sense. You know that Memphis and maybe Chicago, there's rumors they're finally going to maybe get off Vucevic or something. So maybe they would go after a more defensive-minded center like Clingan after having the offensive-minded center for years. So you're trying to convince them for one of 2 scenarios. The first scenario is that one of those 2 teams trades up and takes Clingan ahead of you, which then more likely drops one of your top 5 or whatever back into your spot. All we need is then one team like San Antonio to take a guard or something, and then they're set, right? But the other scenario is if Clingan is still on the board at 7, instead of taking him, you've convinced 2 teams that are behind you, because both Memphis and Chicago are behind Portland in the lot or in the draft process. So if they both think Portland's going to take their guy, then they're maybe giving up more than they would have to go back. And maybe there's a guy like Cody Williams or something that they think they can get at 9. And so they could trade back a couple spots, pick up a future asset, or maybe get a team like Memphis to take on salary because they have a trade exception, I believe, or maybe some cap space that could absorb a Matisse Thybulle or a Robert Williams or someone like that. So you get not only get the guy you were going to take at 7 anyway, but you convinced a team behind you to trade up a couple spots and take on some salary so that you can get out of your tax situation. So those situations would maybe make sense. I don't know. It's hard to believe anything you hear really. But then you look at Gavoni's track record. And we ran through this on Blazers Uprise. He did pretty well. He didn't see the Whitmore fall happening, but he was pretty locked in to a lot of players going to the team they ended up going to. Oh. And he was the first back in January of last year to say that Brandon Miller was moving ahead of Scoot Henderson on a lot of teams' draft boards, and was pretty steadfast in that ever since Charlotte got the second pick, that they were probably going to take Brandon Miller, to the surprise of many. So he's been pretty locked in with a lot of stuff in the past, so it's hard to know if he would do smoke screens like you said. But I think pretty much all these guys, that's how they get their info. They also have to send out stuff that they know is wrong or whatever, just to get these guys to then give them the correct information down the road.
You know, this kind of reminds me of, and what you said makes a lot of sense. It kind of reminds me in the mock off season when I was the Thunder, and I thought that the 2 teams ahead of me were going to take
Yeah.
the center that I wanted. So like, yeah, it makes sense because like when you're in that GM role, which obviously I'm not a real GM, but when I was in
Right.
that role, I was thinking like those two teams needed big men. So I thought, he was the one guy I wanted that I thought made sense for the team I had, which was the Thunder. And I was like, Chicago, New Orleans both need big men. I was like, I want him. Like, I don't know. And I gave up probably too much to move up to get him. So maybe Portland finds himself in that situation. If someone is enamored by Donovan Clingan, like people seem to be. So yeah, it might be a good smokescreen. Hopefully that is the case. If that is what's going on.
Yeah, I just think it's weird if the Blazers end up just like, let's say they traded 7 and 14 for 3 or something. Like, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, right?
Yeah, no, I don't.
Like, what are you doing? And then, they make the trade for Ayton. They've kind of pumped him up as being a key part of the Dame trade, even though you could argue that trade could have happened. Um, they probably could have found a way to make it work without the Dame trade. But that's like, I know we still have Brogdon and Robert Williams technically on the roster, but there aren't a lot of other players or whatever left from that. So I don't know, I just think that would be a really big indication that they are not happy with Ayton. But also, this whole thing, I mean, Ayton has proven over the years that he's not the best at being okay with this kind of stuff, like
that's my problem with him. He's not locked in all the time. He's soft at times, has weak mentality at times, and so that's kind of why I don't view Ayton as a long-term option. Like I know there's times where he's really good, but he's just inconsistent with it, I feel like.
Yeah, but let's say you were hoping that his good stretch the last couple months of the season was going to lead into success. You could argue maybe he's matured a little bit as
Maybe.
a person. They said that he was asked to take on a little bit of a leadership role towards the end of last season and stepped up and was doing a pretty good job of that. So if those things have all been true and you're feeling like maybe he's changed and can be a different person, I just think it's awfully short-sighted of them to like tempt that theory by saying, oh, we're going to not only draft a center with our pick, no, we're going to move up and get this center. So I'd just be surprised if they just put that out there into the universe because it was true and they really want Clingan, because I think that risks you losing Ayton. And so unless you already have some sort of deal in place where you're moving Ayton, which would also kind of surprise me if they moved off of him.
Yeah.
And just went with Clingan as their starting center. I mean, I guess that would be fine if they found a way to do that.
Yeah, I don't know what teams trade for Ayton though right now. It's got to be kind of weird to figure that out.
But like, I just don't know why you would tempt fate with like getting his mental. You feel like you finally got him right mentally, possibly, and then you're going to be like, oh, you know what? You played great. You did everything we wanted you to do at the end of the season. But, we're going to draft your replacement. And, you're probably not going to be around after 2 years remaining in your contract or whatever. Like, it's just, I don't know. I think that's kind of risky if they're floating that out, unless they've told Ayton that these aren't true. Don't worry about it or whatever. But, so if this all happens and plays out and that's exactly what has been going on, they really want Clingan, they move up to get him. I don't know if that signifies that this front office is really capable or competent of like even building a roster the right way. It just seems like a real weird approach to this offseason.
Yeah, when it comes to our front office, it's like just it's so unfortunate to like not have any grasp of what's going on, and that I mean that in a negative way, for me personally, just because like I you go into the offseason and I know some Blazers fans have been okay with what they've done so far. But I, for one, have been just kind of disappointed by everything that's happened, of course. And I think there's a lot of people that are too. But I'm just going in with low expectations and hoping for the best, basically, because I want them to take the right leap, the right direction, and not try to, try to shortcut this thing and try to be a play-in team or whatever. Like, I really hope they make the right decisions this offseason, and I'm worried that that's not going to be the case. And that, falls into this, like, is trading up for Clingan really something that would make any sense for the future of this franchise? I feel like at the point we're at, we should be trying to, hit on both the picks at 7 and 14, or trying to hit on at least one of them, especially in this draft where, the talent gap is not that marginal between all these prospects. So you could potentially maybe get someone at 14 that becomes a long-term option for you. And maybe that's not a star necessarily, but like a good role player or whatever it may be. So yeah, I really hope we're not, doing anything that just shortcuts this. And then, yeah, I don't know, man. I'm nervous about this offseason. I'll say that.
Yeah. Well, I completely agree with you on that. This draft, excluding Sarr, like I mentioned, I think outside of him, I would much rather have multiple chances at just taking stabs than just putting all your eggs in one Donovan Clingan basket and hoping that he is the guy. I don't care who it is outside of Sarr. I would rather have two of them than say I am 100% confident in this one player and use both picks to move up to get this guy. So it's not necessarily a knock on Clingan. I just think there's way too many players that are closely ranked, and they all are kind of different skill set wise, but like you can make a case for a lot of different players being the third best prospect in this draft. So I would rather just stay at 7 and 14 and take my chances on two of them than any other one player.
Yeah, absolutely. I just hopefully this goes well for us. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah. Well, we have the finals matchup now set.
Yeah.
Which we'll get into a minute. So after that finals, we'll finally be able to 100% be focused on the off season. I mean, I was just glad we heard something regarding the Blazers this week, because it's been really quiet, man. It's I don't even remember it being this quiet. I mean, obviously last year, all the talk still to this point was, what are we going to do with the third pick? What are we going to do with it? Who are we going to trade it for?
Yeah.
Whatever. And then we had the people arguing that we should keep it and trade Dame or whatever. And so, yeah, that kind of conversation isn't the same this year. The year before, when we had the 7th pick as well, we ended up taking Sharp, but we also, we're talking about trade scenarios with the 7th pick for
OG Anunoby and all that
for
stuff.
like months, right up until the day of the draft. There was, I mean, these last two drafts, it's been so weird on our draft broadcast because, and we'll have a draft broadcast again for both nights of the NBA draft on June 26th and June 27th this year over on our main channel, Blazers Uprise. So tune into that if you're interested in that kind of stuff. But like, it's hard to like get excited or like know what's going on with the picks the last 2 years, because like we didn't know if they took those players for us or if we were still
for another team,
possibly going to trade them. So it's like, okay, we got Sharp, but it's like there's not this reaction like, yes, like, because if we would have known we were keeping Sharp, I think both Tori and I would have reacted differently, because we would have enjoyed the fact that they took a high upside guy. And and I thought that was the best player on the board at 7 there. So I would have been happy with it. But last year, it's just like, wait, what are we? Are we gonna just keep Scoot? And like, what does that mean for Dame? Like all like just like this weird energy around it and stuff, and then the weird press conference afterwards with Cronin and stuff. So that didn't help either. But this year, though, it's like it just seems like unless we trade up, but if we traded up, you usually hear about that kind of stuff before the pick happens or right after the pick happens. So I think this year when we're in rebuilds, it's a little bit different. So I just hope we start to hear a lot more draft rumors and stuff like that after the season's over.
Yeah, we'll know that we're not, debating between, well, I guess we still could potentially be. I was going to say we're not trading it for veteran win now help, to help Dame. Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully we're not doing that now this offseason for, whoever it may be. Like, I know there's been a couple rumors floating around about like Houston and I think there was I think Memphis maybe was mentioned as well about trading their lottery pick for veteran win now help. That shouldn't be a situation we're in. So yeah, hopefully that this year will be just taking the rookies and we know they're staying and all that. So
yeah, it's rumored once again that Houston's going to offer that third pick for Mikal Bridges. Will the Nets turn down the third pick 2 years in a row? Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Brooklyn is going to be interesting to watch this offseason for sure.
Yeah. All right, so both series were 2-0.
Which, by the way, we answered the Blazer question up top this time. We heard the feedback last episode, how we answered at the end.
There you go.
Yeah, now
what? Now you're just going to turn it off? Yeah. I mean, come on. Don't you want to watch the rest of this episode?
Yeah. All right. But go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's all good. So both series were 2-0. Boston ends up finishing off the sweep. Halliburton doesn't play the last couple games. But man, if you're Indy, I mean, it was a great season. You're ahead of schedule, I guess. You make the big Siakam trade. I think that as long as they re-sign him this offseason, will prove to be a good move. And they have a little bit of flexibility to make some moves this summer. So it'll be, keep our eyes on what they do. But man, I'd still, if I'm a fan, I'm just like, I keep thinking back to that Blazers 2019 Western Conference Finals run.
Very similar.
They have the lead in the second half of all 4 games, including a double-digit lead in the last 3 of them, but still get swept and just cannot find a way to finish off the Golden State Warriors. And the Pacers in this one, they should have been up 3-1 probably in this series. I mean, who knows if they win one of those, if it plays out the same way. Maybe Boston plays a little more desperation. But they had 3 of these games, and it's just kind of sad that it ended up being a sweep when the Pacers were so competitive and had so many good performances. Andrew Nembhard looked like a true lead guard on a team. So I don't know if they're going to try to make him and Halliburton work in the future, but that might be someone they could dangle out there to get another star on the team or something. But man, what do you think the Pacers should do this offseason after kind of their season kind of ended with a thud, losing 3 of the leads in that series?
Yeah, really unfortunate. Like I said, it was very similar to the Blazers 2019 run where they have leads in all those games and just find a way to crumble at the end. And game 4 was no different. Derek White hits the corner 3 to end their season, and that's pretty much all she wrote. But what you did see, as you mentioned, in these final 2 games is Andrew Nembhard looked absolutely amazing, which I saw a lot of feedback off of that. Someone was even out there tweeting that Nembhard will be better than Tyrese Halliburton one day and stuff like that. And now people are talking about, is he the new lead guard that needs to go find a new situation somewhere else? And if he goes somewhere else, he's going to become the next Brunson, Shea, Halliburton when they get, roles like that. So, What he showed was very impressive those final 2 games. And he is a great player. So like, it wouldn't shock me to the least bit if that were the case. But if you would have asked me years ago, like I mentioned already in an episode before about that on Brunson, I never would have thought Brunson became this good. So maybe Andrew Nembhard could be this good on a different team. I think he has like another option after this season, team option. So he is under team control for at least 2 more years, but he's extension eligible. So it would be interesting if he even values wanting to go somewhere else, But as far as what Indiana should do this offseason is I think they clearly need another 3-and-D wing. No, those obviously don't grow on trees. They're very hard to acquire, but they need someone. And 3 guys that, I did a Pacers, video as I always do when teams get eliminated. And the 3 guys I was looking at for them was first, of course, no obvious name, Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges would be a really good player for them to bring in. He's on a great contract as well, so especially in this new CBA. Mikal should be very valuable this offseason. And then you have another, guy who's on a decent contract as well. DeAndre Hunter in Atlanta. Don't know what Atlanta's plans will be this offseason, but that's another guy. And then another interesting one in DC is maybe Kyle Kuzma. You could maybe go look at Kyle Kuzma to come over. So yeah, I think those are the kind of guys. I should be looking for another wing, I feel like, to put next to Siakam. So I think you keep Miles Turner, hopefully Mathurin comes back better than ever. I feel like Obi Toppin also fit extremely well on this team. So it does make me wonder the future of Jarris Walker. Like, is he ever really going to get an opportunity here in Indiana? It feels like that could be really tough for him to ever crack the rotation. So maybe Jarris Walker's dangled out there because they did trade a couple picks, obviously, to get Siakam. So their tradable first-round picks are going to be a little bit limited. Maybe Jarris Walker's the guy that has some value to some teams that they could dangle. But maybe they value keeping Jarris Walker. I'm not sure. But yeah, I feel like they should be looking at some wings, and Kuzma, Hunter, Mikal are guys that I feel like would make a lot of sense for Indiana if they could acquire one of those 3 guys.
Yeah, those are interesting names. I don't know if Kuzma and Siakam is the greatest fit, but Mikal and Siakam would be really nice, I think. Yeah, and well, if you had Nembhard and Jarris Walker as trade pieces, I mean, that's pretty good value to go out and acquire someone. I don't know if a team like the Nets would value those 2 guys over like the 3rd pick and maybe getting some of their other picks back from Houston. But yeah, the other thing about the Pacers is they are the smallest market in the NBA. Would they go deep in the tax for this team if needed, if they need to re-sign everyone, if they make a couple big trades and then have to have extensions kick in down the road for some of their younger guys?
That's a good question.
To be seen. I don't know. I mean,
that's why Paul George left years ago, is because they didn't want to pay to have a good team. And he had said that he had people that wanted to come to Indiana, and Indiana didn't want to pay for it. So
yeah. So maybe it's different now. Maybe they just want to win. Never know. But I think that's going to be the key for them moving forward. If it's a case where it's kind of like Portland's been the last couple of years, where you have to kind of be mindful of not going in the tax, I just think that's really hard for a team unless you hit on another draft pick or something along the way to continue to manage the tax and also keep building your roster up. So that remains to be seen. But yeah, they definitely have some options. They have, like I mentioned, a couple trade pieces. They have, former Blazer personnel, Kevin Pritchard and Chad Buchanan running the ship there as the president and GM. So they've made some really good moves over the last couple of years. But we've seen a lot of teams have a run like this. Look at like the Atlanta Hawks as well. They made the Eastern Conference Finals a few years ago. They go all in on DeJounte Murray. That doesn't work out really. And they haven't even come close to duplicating that success in the last couple of years. So it's I wouldn't say it's easy to have a run like this because it is not easy, but it doesn't guarantee that you're going to be back in this position moving forward. A team like Philadelphia has all that cap space and could make some huge moves this summer. Boston, I don't think, is going anywhere anytime soon. It might be the defending champions. Milwaukee, you would think another year of Dame and Giannis learning how to play together, and if they make some moves to better that roster, there's teams. Cleveland, you don't know what they're going to do this offseason, but they're pretty strong. Orlando looks like they're on the come up. They have a ton of cap space, could improve their roster as well. So it's not a guarantee that they're even going to have like home court advantage or anything or be one of the top teams in the East next year. So I don't know what exactly they're going to do, but they can't be complacent in my mind. They have to make smart moves, and they have to try to find a way to not just be like, oh, let's run this back and we'll get back to the finals again. Because I think if they do that, they're probably like a first or second round exit.
Yeah, don't be the 2019 Blazers. Don't be the 2021 Hawks. You can't stay complacent after having a little bit of a fluky run. You gotta do something. You got to do something. You cannot stay complacent, like you said.
All right, so Boston is on to the finals, and then their opponent will be the Dallas Mavericks, who win in 5 games. Brady had this finals matchup. Those when we picked our playoffs back in
whenever it was
before the playoffs started. Yeah. So before we get to the finals, let's just talk about Minnesota real quick. They lose game 3. The first 3 games of this series, well, the first 4 games end up being really competitive games. Once, just like 3 of the Boston Pacers series, could have gone either way. Could have been talking about Minnesota sweeping or them have gone to a game 7, all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't meant to be. Dallas was just too good in the clutch. Minnesota hasn't been a great clutch team all year, while Dallas has been. And when you have killers like Luka and Kyrie on the court, that stands to reason that you would be good in the clutch. But Minnesota, it really felt, and Charles Barkley said this after the game or at halftime of game 5, because a lot of people were saying Minnesota is set up. They could be this. They've been competitive in all these games. That it could easily be them. That's the team that breaks the 3-0 curse that no team has ever come back from. And it really felt like, I agree with Charles on this, that they just got happy to win that one game and not get swept, and then didn't show up in game 5. And it was kind of sad to see them go out like that. But they're a team, unlike the Pacers, they don't have a lot of flexibility in terms of what they can do, especially if they keep the core of Edwards, Cat, and Gobert.
And McDaniel's big contract.
Yeah, McDaniel's contract kicks in. So they're going to have to find a way to improve their roster without many ways to do so. I don't know if they're going to be able to get ring chasers to come to Minnesota, but they've got to find a way to make some small moves that end up paying up big time for them. And I don't really know how they're going to be able to accomplish that, but they have to tweak it a little bit, in my opinion.
The worst part for Minnesota as well, as this summer there will be a huge battle going on between Glenn Taylor and Alec Rodriguez and Mark Lore, because there's an ownership problem there, and Glenn Taylor has only paid the luxury tax like twice, I think, throughout his tenure with the Timberwolves. And then Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lore have hinted at cutting payroll. So I don't know what they're gonna do, like, because it doesn't feel like they can do much right now. Like, they're going to be very limited to what they can do. They're gonna have the 27th pick in the draft, I believe, and then they're gonna be very close to the second apron, if not over it, by the time they sign their draft picks. They're going to be a team that's not gonna be able to do much, and if both owners or both whoever gets to actually own the team, I'm not sure how it's gonna play out, obviously, but if either one of those owners wants to cut salary, the obvious guy to get rid of is Karl Anthony Towns. Gobert wouldn't bring you, but probably wouldn't bring you much back on the trade market. Gobert just isn't someone who I would see as valuable, especially as much as they give up to get him. You're not trading Edwards, obviously. You're not trading Jamie Daniels more than likely. So, yeah, if you're going to shed salary, that's going to make you worse. And if that's what Minnesota's prioritizing after having a season like this, that's a problem. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. As far as the Mavericks are concerned, when Luka wants to end the series, he wants to end the series. He came out, scored 20 in the first quarter, just hitting these step back threes in their face. Like, there was nothing the Timberwolves could have done, and I think they were just drained. And then when Kyrie and Luka combined for 72 points, the game, it's over, man. It's over. And it's funny because I had this game on, and I'm kind of glad it was a blowout, because life was happening. Because this was a series I wanted to watch every time. I watched Boston and Indiana, and that was a good series too. But I was excited about this one. I think everybody was. So I was always locked in when these games are on. Not that I wasn't locked into Boston, Indiana, but just a little bit more on these. And life was happening. I had so much going on at the time, so I was kind of glad it was a blowout. I had after the first quarter, like, not that I'll get into it, but there was just like so much going on. But yeah, so unfortunately, the Timberwolves go home, and now they get to go question themselves, or have the biggest question mark, because there's going to be rumors flying everywhere about this team, especially on Cat, especially because of how bad Cat was in these conference finals. He did have a good last two games, of course, but not great from three. As the best shooting big man ever, as he self-proclaims. So I'm not sure, because Minnesota is not going to change that much. Unless if they trade Cat, I don't see them changing that much at all. Hopefully they can nail their 27th pick and have an impact rookie potentially, which is going to be very important for any team in this new CBA, especially these contenders that are so deep in payroll. So it'll just be a wild offseason. And I'm kind of glad, I wouldn't say that I'm not glad to be a Timberwolves fan, but because we, as Blazers fans, obviously, we don't love our ownership scenario right now. But Minnesota, if I'm in a contender, if I'm where they're at right now, and I fear that just because the owners prioritize wanting to be cheaper, right, like especially with how good they were this season, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And I can't wait.
Well, the rumor is that Glenn Taylor wanted to back out of the deal because he heard that they were going to try and control how crazy the payroll had gotten, and wanted to kind of limit it going forward. But that doesn't make a ton of sense, considering, like you mentioned, Glenn Taylor has also been someone that's been cheap and accused of not being willing to go all in to help the team. So to me, that does seem like he watched this team, start to play well. They were, contending for the 1 seed all season. And that's when I think he started to have some regret watching Anthony Edwards be a star. And, he's young enough you have a decade of him if you get him to stay in Minnesota past his second contract or whatever. So you got a situation where you have a young star, one of the most fun players in the league, and you have a chance to build on that and grow your fan base because of him. And so I think he really regretted at one point putting the team up for sale, and then he kind of used that as his reasoning for doing that. And then, of course, I guess they missed a payment or was supposed to pay off a thing by a certain date. Both sides say that the other side didn't do something or whatever. So it's a lot of he said stuff at this point. But I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen or how the judge will rule in that situation. But yeah, if I'm a Minnesota fan, I don't feel comfortable in either of these guys
Yeah.
putting money in, despite what Glenn Taylor's saying. I think he's just trying to use that as another, way to justify him kind of backing out of the deal or whatever.
Yeah, it's gonna be a weird situation for sure. But on to Dallas. Dallas is a perfect example of taking risks can sometimes pay off because the Kyrie Irving trade years ago, he was on an expiring contract. He was going to need to be paid in the summer. Would he even want to stay in Dallas? And the Dallas Mavericks decided to trade a 2029 first. They traded Dorian Finney-Smith, I think a second or two, and then obviously Spencer Dinwiddie. And Kyrie had so many off the court problems, so many off court drama going on with him, and it looked terrible at first too. When Kyrie and Luka played together last year, it did not work at all. Like it looked bad, and it was a decently small sample size, but they weren't very good together. They decide, to pull the plug for like the final 2 games of the season. That ends up getting them Derek Lively in the offseason, which obviously. He's probably the third most impactful player on that team right now. So, and then you go to the trade deadline. This team is like fighting in the play-in spot. And then you trade for PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, and you mortgage a couple more first-round picks. You already owe a pick to the Knicks from the Porzingis trade that still hasn't been completed. So, and now
it'll be completed this year.
Yeah, it'll be completed now. Yeah. So like. Dallas has just done a fantastic job because there's just rumor after rumor about, Luka, is Luka going to request a trade? And, that's how the NBA media is. They like to see stars go to the big markets, and that's usually how it goes. So will Luka request a trade or whatever? And now the Mavericks find themselves in the NBA Finals, and they've done a terrific job of building around Luka Doncic, and Luka and Kyrie have been amazing together now. Kyrie's been a model citizen. I don't know what they did to Kyrie, but he has been a model citizen. It sounds like Mark Cuban has done a great job treating Kyrie Irving differently compared to maybe other situations he was in. Not that Kyrie Irving deserves any excuses, but I know I saw another report, during when Ramadan, that Brooklyn would just give him a banana, but Dallas has an on-site chef for Kyrie. So stuff like that, I'm sure has helped out Kyrie's, his what he's been doing in Dallas. So I'm just very happy for the Mavericks, man, just because, they drafted Luka. They nailed that pick by trading Trae Young or making that trade with Trae Young. And now they're in the finals. And I love Luka Doncic. I know some people hate him because of how much he complains to the refs. He does complain quite a bit, but I'm a big Luka Doncic fan, so I'm happy to see that Dallas has made it to the finals.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the key things, and this is like a really underrated trait to have, especially as a GM, and it's admitting when something you tried didn't work. And so
like Sam Presti did with Gordon Hayward.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not to that extent where you're just putting the player on blast, but so the Porzingis thing, it just, for whatever reason, it wasn't working. They get rid of him. They trade him for nothing, basically. A couple of
it was like Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. That was it. Maybe a second was in there or something.
And then so you move on from him, and you could argue they should have gotten more value back. They probably should have. But Porzingis' value was kind of cooked a little bit at the time.
Yep.
But this offseason they signed Grant Williams, and he was supposed to be their what PJ Washington is doing right now. He was supposed to be that guy for them. He had some playoff experience, was a winning type of guy or whatever. And for whatever reason with him, it just wasn't working either. So they move off him and get someone different. They draft Lively, and he's playing great, but they know they need a backup center. They re-signed Powell, who was a key part of their conference finals run a few years ago, but he's not played well since that run. And so they they bring in another center in Gafford, and they reload, man, and they don't just sit around and be like, well, we got to see if these moves pan out or whatever. No, they flip quickly and move on to the next thing. And it's not always the right thing to do, because sometimes with some patience or whatever, you can have a team gel and be fine that way. But I like that they were active. They identified what type of players you need, and this, bringing it back to the whole Donovan Clingan conversation from the beginning of the show, like bigs like Gafford and Lively, where Luka can just get into the paint and literally just throw the ball up, not even knowing where those guys are sometimes. Just throw the ball up near the hoop when you're double teamed, knowing that one of them's got to be open or something, and they can just go up and dunk it. It's such an advantage, man. Like it makes the game so simple when you have a point guard who can make those reads, and then you have a big who knows where to position themselves, and they have a good chemistry and feeling for where they're supposed to be and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I think a big like Lively is much more capable and suited to play with someone like Scoot, who does a lot of the same things, not to Luka's extent, obviously, but like he's the kind of guy who is strong and can get in the lane and can maybe throw a lot of these passes that Luka's throwing eventually. But if you don't have a rim running lob target, it might not be as effective if you're just dumping it off to Ayton shooting free throw line jumpers, or Donovan Clingan, who's not the most mobile or quickest guy to the hoop off the pick and roll. So in my opinion, Dallas has done a great job of just finding the right types of players that fit well with Luka and Kyrie. And they've now gotten several of them. And yeah, I mean, they're still in a position where they can maybe do a few things this offseason. They have Tim Hardaway's making a ton of money still, and he hasn't done much in these playoffs. So maybe you can do something with his contract. Because of the way the Kyrie trade panned out, they really didn't have to give up a lot for him, considering how good Kyrie is, because of the reasons you mentioned. And so you're not really hamstrung at all from that trade still. I mean, it kind of hurt at the time to lose Dorian Finney-Smith because he was a key part of your defense and all that kind of stuff. But no one's like worried about it now that they replaced him with some of these players like PJ Washington. So they just done a really good job of retooling, and they still have now the pick going to New York this year allows them to trade either a 2026 or a 2027 first, and then they're also will be opening up a 2031 first, so they can maybe do a few things this summer as well. Maybe I'm forgetting that they gave up a swap or something in that Gafford or Washington trade. I forget which one, but they still have some pieces to make some deals and improve even more. And they might even need to, because they might be the champions, as they have a pretty good chance of winning this, in my opinion.
So speaking of Boston, Dallas, not that we've gone on record, or we just credited the Mavericks for the longest time. Boston, of course, Brad Stevens, we know he's a genius. He's went from coaching to the front office. He's done a great job putting together that team. So who wins? Is it there's so many storylines going into this. Kyrie Irving gets to play Boston. Kristaps Porzingis gets to play Dallas. Lively should be, Lively played Game 5, so he'll be healthy. Kristaps has been resting off of I forget what the injury was, but I forgot what it was. But he'll be back in this series. Or you assume so anyway. Obviously when I made my prediction, I said Dallas, Boston, NBA Finals, but I stopped Dallas's run here and I said Boston in 6. And
you wanted to pick Dallas.
I want to pick. I'm rooting for Dallas. My heart tells me pick the Mavericks. I want the Mavericks to win, and I think this is going 6 or 7, or at least I hope it is. We got 4 and 5 games in the conference finals. Let's get a 6 or 7 game series in the finals, please. I've really enjoyed this season, and it sucks it's going to be gone here soon. But I feel like we got a really good NBA finals ahead of us, so hopefully it's good. My heart tells me to pick the Mavericks, but my brain, like I picked in the playoffs video, I said Celtics in 6. I'm going to stick to that, but I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm hoping Dallas wins. But I cannot wait. I think this series is going to be a ton of fun. I cannot wait to see what Luka does against Boston and how they try to defend him. And then I can't wait to see if Boston has the same energy for Kyrie they always have had when he's come to Boston, and how hostile it's been for him. So it's just going to be electric, and I genuinely cannot wait.
Yeah, I think Boston should win. This. And I don't think this is a negative, like everyone says. You can only beat the teams that win and make it to the next round. So I don't think it's their fault that they haven't necessarily had the toughest path in NBA history or anything like that to get here to this point. But they've been by far the best team all season. Dallas has not. They just kind of been, they were in the play-in for a large portion of this season, make the good moves at the trade deadline, and then come on strong at the end, get out of the play-in. But they're still not world beaters until these playoffs. They've been really good. But Boston has just been in another universe this year. They're like analytically and all that kind of stuff. Every team that puts up the kind of metrics they do has won the finals in the past. And so I still think there's no excuse for them to do it. But having said all that, I don't trust them to get it done until they actually do it. So, and then the way they played last series doesn't give me a lot of confidence. I know Porzingis being back will help a lot. And that'll be really tough for Dallas to match up with all their players if they're healthy. But something about Dallas just having that ability to finish games in the clutch, the ability to get stuff done, the never panic when you get down 3 with a couple minutes left type behavior. And Boston won some close games against the Pacers, so it's not like they can't win close games or anything. I just feel like this Dallas team is just on a mission, and they're just hitting on all cylinders right now. And so assuming both teams are healthy, I think Dallas gets them, man. I hope it goes 7, like you said. But man, I think they're going to win this series.
I hope, man. And you're right. Boston, they just play with, they're one of those teams that, especially in these playoffs, they have shown they like to play with their food a little bit. Like they don't like just smash teams.
Even though they're 12-2 in the playoffs. It's weird to say that, right?
Yeah. But it's just because I think it's just because of how high the expectations were and how weak their opponents were with all the injuries. Like, Boston, you should just be, blowing these guys out or just not even having to sweat these crunch times. Like, Indiana had them on the ropes for 3 out of the 4 games, and they, just somehow found a way. And you'd like to think if Dallas was in that situation, Dallas is not giving those leads up like Indiana did. So, if Boston does that against Dallas, they could be in deep trouble. And which is why I think this series, it could go either way. Again, I am picking Boston, but I hope Dallas wins. I'm rooting for Luka. I'm rooting for Kyrie to get another ring. But I wouldn't be mad at either one of these teams winning. Tatum and Jaylen Brown both getting a championship would be awesome. Luka getting a championship, his first one, would be awesome as well. And then why are they still, by the way, why are they still trying to cause problems between Tatum and Jaylen Brown? It's so weird to me. Like, I don't get it. Like, they're in the NBA Finals, and ESPN's talking about how Jason Tatum looked unhappy with Brown winning the conference finals. Like it's so dumb, man. I don't know. I don't get it. But that's besides the point. I just can't wait to see these finals because obviously basketball isn't until Thursday, and then there will be no basketball for a while. So yeah, we're still quite a ways away from the NBA Finals, but.
Don't pull a Nike hoops. There's no men's basketball.
Oh yeah, there's WNBA. Sorry.
The WNBA.
Yeah, that's true. Which Caitlin Clark has been getting beaten down by everyone.
Watch her take a bunch of cheap shots.
Yeah, no kidding, man. It's kind of crazy how much attention she's drawn to that league, and they just hate her. It feels like everyone hates her there. But whatever, I guess.
Yeah, that's so. Anywhere from 4 to 7 games left in the NBA season. We're filming this on Saturday, June 1st. So we have 25 days until the NBA draft. So it feels like it's about to end and it's going to be a slow period, but this is like the busiest 30 to 40 days of the NBA season. With all the off-season stuff happening pretty quickly right after the season ends. The draft happens pretty shortly thereafter, and then a few days after the draft is NBA free agency. So it's about to kick into high gear. We don't have very much time. It feels like it's still so far away, but it's not. So yeah, hopefully these finals games are good. Assuming we can record on Friday, we'll be able to talk about game 1. Hopefully have some other Blazer rumors. If you want to hear some more in-depth stuff on Nembhard being a star, Indiana Pacers rebuild, Minnesota Timberwolves rebuild, go check out Crushables' YouTube channel. He has a video for all 3 of those things over the last week. So go check out all those videos if you want more in-depth on what Brady here thinks those teams should do to rebuild and become NBA champions. Yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. Really appreciate everyone who tuned in and watched. Once again, you can find this on anywhere you get your podcast. Just look for Hoops Crush. You can find it on there. Also, of course, as many of you are watching right now on YouTube as well. Leave a comment below on your thoughts on Donovan Clingan. Do you think the Blazers should move up to get him? Do you disagree with Brady and I on that regard? And then who do you got in the finals? Put it all out there right now. Let's get everyone on record in the comments. Who will win, Boston or Dallas? Leave your comment below. But thanks again for tuning in, Brady. Hope you have a good rest of your weekend. And you, as well. You can hit the outro, my man.
All right. Thank you guys for watching as always. Peace out. Go Blazers.